Moscow has finally authorized a nuclear deal with two of its most notable West African friends, Mali and Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso just partnered with Russia to build West Africa's first nuclear power plant, a project so ambitious it could transform not just the country, but the entire region. Recently, massive shipments started arriving without fanfare, sparking speculation across the nation. People are calling them the second consignment, claiming these deliveries are preparing the country for its nuclear future. The excitement is building while the project moves forward with strategic precision. So what's really happening in Burkina Faso? What are these convoys actually carrying? And how is one African nation finally breaking free from energy dependence to build its own power future? This is the story of a country refusing to accept the limitations the world tried to impose and daring to reach for technology that will change everything. Burkina Faso's electricity crisis is real and devastating. Only 19.5% of the population has access to electricity according to World Bank data. In rural areas, that number drops to just 5%. Entire regions go dark for hours every single day. Hospitals run without reliable power. Schools can't use computers. Factories shut down mid-production. Businesses close early because there's no light to stay open. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a development ceiling that has kept the nation from reaching its full potential. The country tried everything Western institutions recommended: solar panels, diesel generators, hydroelectric dams, imported power from neighboring countries. Nothing worked at scale. By 2024, national electricity coverage reached 50%, but that still means half the country lives without power. The urban electrification rate is 86%, but rural areas remain stuck at 5.49%. Every plan for industry, agriculture, or technology hit the same wall. There simply wasn't enough electricity to power real development. Western financial institutions offered loans with conditions. International energy companies proposed projects that would keep Burkina Faso dependent on foreign fuel and foreign expertise. The same pattern that has kept African nations trapped in cycles of dependence for decades. But in October 2023, Burkina Faso's leader Ibrahim Traoré made a decision that broke that pattern completely. He approached Russia's state nuclear corporation Rosatom and proposed building a nuclear power plant on Burkinabe soil, a partnership based on technology transfer and true sovereignty. At first, international observers dismissed it as unrealistic, as just another African dream that would never materialize. But by June 2025, everything changed. Burkina Faso's energy minister Yakuba Zebreguba and Rosatom CEO Alexei Lukashev signed binding intergovernmental agreements in St. Petersburg, formalizing the construction of West Africa's first nuclear power plant. This wasn't a loan scheme or a dependency trap. This was a real partnership with a nation willing to transfer technology and build long-term capacity. The deal was transformative. Rosatom committed to completing construction of a small modular nuclear reactor within 5 years if all technical, regulatory, and human capacity conditions are met. That means by 2030, Burkina Faso could have a functioning nuclear plant producing clean, consistent electricity 24 hours a day. Minister Gauba stated publicly that nuclear power is the only technology capable of doubling national electricity production by 2030, calling it essential for the country to achieve real sovereignty in energy matters. Those words, real sovereignty, represent everything this project stands for. Shortly after the agreements were signed, people across Burkina Faso started noticing something exciting. Heavy convoys of trucks loaded with large equipment began entering the country. Not ordinary trucks carrying basic supplies, but specialized vehicles transporting massive machinery, metal frames, industrial crates, and equipment that signaled serious infrastructure development. These convoys moved with purpose. Organized, protected, and clearly part of something significant. Citizens started recording videos on their phones, sharing their excitement about what was coming. They posted clips showing massive trucks rolling into Ouagadougou. Others captured footage of containers being moved to secure facilities. Social media filled with hope and speculation. Some wondered if it was thermal equipment for the power grid. Others believed it was solar hardware. But many people, especially those who had followed the nuclear announcements closely, connected the dots. They started celebrating what they saw as shipments related to the nuclear project, calling them the second consignment of equipment arriving to prepare the ground for the reactor. The speculation made perfect sense. Nuclear construction requires a strong electrical grid before it can even begin. Preliminary work like site preparation, cooling system installation, command center construction, electrical substation work, and safety perimeter setup requires massive amounts of stable electricity. The current grid, while improving, needs reinforcement to support continuous 24/7 construction demands. So people reasonably assumed the government was strengthening infrastructure as part of the nuclear preparation phase. The government's measured approach to announcements reflected strategic wisdom, not secrecy. Traoré understands something crucial. When an African nation reaches for advanced technology, it must build solid foundations before international interference can slow progress. This isn't about hiding, it's about protecting a transformative project from the forces that have historically prevented African development. Here's what we know with certainty. In November 2024, Turkey's AXA Energy signed a 20-year electricity purchase agreement with Burkina Faso's national utility Sonabel to construct and operate a 119-megawatt fuel oil power plant in Ouagadougou. That's massive progress. This single plant will add nearly one-third of the country's current total electricity production capacity. The facility is scheduled to be fully operational by late 2026, perfectly timed as nuclear site preparation accelerates. This demonstrates brilliant planning. Nuclear construction is the most electricity-intensive phase of a nuclear project, not the operation phase. Once a reactor runs, it generates its own power. But building it requires 24/7 stable electricity for cranes, cooling and testing systems, monitoring equipment, welding systems, high-capacity machinery, and technical processes that demand absolute reliability. Minister Zabre Guba stated clearly that the country cannot industrialize without large, stable, sovereign energy sources, and that nuclear power is the best path forward. He's absolutely right. Countries with limited hydropower potential and inconsistent thermal capacity need reliable baseload power. Solar and wind are valuable but intermittent. Diesel and fuel oil are expensive and keep nations dependent on imports. Nuclear provides constant power that runs regardless of weather, time of day, or global fuel market disruptions. Nuclear also offers something revolutionary for African nations: true energy independence. You cannot build a nuclear plant without developing local expertise. You cannot operate one without training highly skilled engineers. You cannot maintain one without creating a sophisticated technical workforce. This means technology transfer, not just technology purchase. This means capacity building, not just capacity renting. Beyond the ACSA Energy thermal plant, Burkina Faso is expanding solar capacity strategically. New transformers are being installed across the grid. Old transmission lines are being replaced. Grid upgrades are accelerating nationwide. These aren't random infrastructure projects. They're the foundation of energy sovereignty, the groundwork for a future where Burkina Faso controls its own destiny. Traoré's strategic approach to development reflects lessons learned from history. When African nations announce major projects too early, they face immediate pressure. Western governments that prefer African nations remain dependent on their systems, international institutions that push conditions that undermine sovereignty, and media campaigns questioning African capability. By building quietly and revealing results when foundations are solid, Burkina Faso protects its own interests. This method isn't secrecy, it's wisdom. The UAE, Egypt, and South Korea used similar approaches during early nuclear development. Focused groundwork, strategic disclosure, and public celebration only after major milestones were irreversible. Traoré is following a proven playbook: build the capacity first, demonstrate results, then showcase achievements when success is undeniable. The focus on sovereignty is central to everything Traoré does. Energy dependence has been one of the main tools used to control African nations for generations. Control a nation's fuel supply and you control its economy. Control its electricity, and you control its development. But once a country generates its own vast, stable electricity supply through nuclear power, that control mechanism breaks. This is Traoré's vision: sovereignty backed by infrastructure, a nation that cannot be pressured through energy manipulation. So how close is Burkina Faso to beginning physical nuclear construction? Closer than most international observers realize. Rosatom doesn't sign binding intergovernmental agreements unless both sides are ready to move from discussion to implementation. Once those agreements were finalized in June 2025, the country officially entered the pre-construction phase, an intensive period including feasibility studies, site evaluations, safety planning, and capacity building. These steps are happening right now. Rosatom engineers are evaluating sites to select ideal geological conditions. Burkinabe officials are drafting nuclear legislation aligned with International Atomic Energy Agency safety standards. Training programs are active, with Burkinabe engineers and technicians learning reactor physics, radiation protection, and nuclear infrastructure management. Burkina Faso's ambassador to Russia, Aristide Rapagdanba Ludovic Tepsoba, confirmed in October 2025 that Burkinabe students are already being trained in nuclear technology in Russia, stating, "We have excellent relations with Rosatom. Our students are already being trained. This represents real partnership. Russia is transferring knowledge, not just selling equipment. They're building local capacity, not creating permanent dependence." Compare this to Western energy projects in Africa, which typically involve foreign companies extracting resources or foreign operators running facilities while African workers remain in low-skill positions. The Rosatom approach invests in African expertise from day one. Grid preparation proves the seriousness of progress. The 119-megawatt AXA energy plant scheduled for late 2026 aligns perfectly with the window when nuclear site preparation will accelerate. This is how nuclear development works globally. Stabilize the grid, strengthen foundational infrastructure, then begin physical construction in coordinated phases. Burkina Faso is following international best practices with impressive precision. If progress continues at the current pace, physical site preparation could begin between 2026 and 2027. That timeline is realistic and consistent with global nuclear development norms for small modular reactors. And once site preparation begins, the project becomes visible and unstoppable. Equipment arrives in massive quantities. Foundations are poured. International technical teams mobilize alongside trained Burkinabe specialists. The transformation becomes undeniable. When nuclear construction becomes physically visible, Burkina Faso's identity transforms from a nation struggling with electricity to a nation actively building its own advanced power infrastructure. That shift carries enormous symbolic weight. It demonstrates to the entire continent that African nations can master the same technologies that power wealthy countries. It proves that sovereignty is achievable. It shows that breaking free from historical dependency patterns is possible. The economic impact will be transformative. Industries that avoided the country due to power instability will suddenly take serious interest. Factories needing consistent electricity, data centers requiring uninterrupted supply, agro-processing plants that have waited for stable power. All of these become viable. Jobs will be created across multiple sectors: engineering, construction, logistics, training, environmental management, and advanced technology. A nuclear project becomes an employment engine generating thousands of direct jobs and tens of thousands of indirect opportunities. Social transformation will be profound. Blackouts, which today feel normal, will become rare. Schools will run equipment continuously. Hospitals will operate advanced medical devices reliably. Businesses will extend operating hours. Rural electrification will shift from dream to achievable goal. Electricity means refrigeration that preserves food and medicine. It means pumps that bring clean water. It means internet connectivity linking villages to global markets. It means machines that process crops locally, creating value-added products instead of exporting raw materials at low prices. Geopolitically, Burkina Faso becomes a model for African development. Energy independence translates to political independence. A nation with its own nuclear backbone cannot be easily pressured, isolated, or manipulated through energy threats. This represents the future Traoré envisions: sovereignty backed by infrastructure, development driven by African initiative, progress that benefits African people. The psychological impact will be even deeper. For generations, African nations were told that advanced technology wasn't for them, that they should focus on raw material extraction, that nuclear power was too complex for African capability. A functioning nuclear plant in Burkina Faso destroys that narrative completely. It proves African nations can master sophisticated technology. It demonstrates that determination and smart partnerships can overcome any development ceiling. It inspires an entire generation of young Africans to pursue careers in nuclear science, engineering, and advanced technology. When construction progresses, West Africa will watch closely with growing interest. A successful nuclear project in Burkina Faso creates a powerful precedent that energy transformation is achievable for any determined African nation. If Burkina Faso succeeds, Mali might pursue similar partnerships. Niger might explore nuclear options. Chad might develop plans. The entire Sahel region could experience an energy revolution that fundamentally shifts continental power dynamics. Russia is clearly committed to African nuclear development. Rosatom is building a nuclear plant in Egypt, the most advanced nuclear project on the continent outside South Africa. It has active partnerships with Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Morocco, Tunisia, and Uganda. These aren't colonial extraction projects. They're technology partnerships offering financing terms and knowledge transfer that Western nations refuse to provide. Most Rosatom contracts include long-term operating, maintenance, and fuel supply agreements that ensure continuous support and expertise sharing for decades. When the nuclear plant finally switches on, Burkina Faso enters an elite category. It becomes one of fewer than 35 nations on Earth with operating nuclear reactors. It joins a select group that includes the United States, France, China, Russia, Japan, South Korea, and only one other African nation, South Africa. That's not just prestigious, it's strategically transformative. A functioning nuclear plant means Burkina Faso can finally industrialize on its own terms. Aluminum smelting, which requires enormous continuous power, becomes possible. Steel production becomes viable. Pharmaceutical manufacturing, which needs ultra-reliable electricity for temperature-controlled environments, can scale domestically. Tech infrastructure like server farms and data centers can be built. The country stops exporting raw cotton and starts producing finished textiles. It stops exporting raw gold and starts refining it locally. Value-added manufacturing, the true key to economic development, becomes achievable. Electricity prices stabilize and potentially drop significantly. When supply consistently exceeds demand, prices fall. Businesses can plan long-term investments confidently. Households can afford modern appliances without fear of price spikes. Economic growth accelerates because energy is no longer the bottleneck limiting every sector. Regional influence expands dramatically. Burkina Faso could become an electricity exporter, selling excess nuclear power to neighboring countries through regional grid interconnections. That transforms the country from aid recipient to regional energy provider, generating hard currency while helping neighbors develop. Political leverage increases. Economic partnerships strengthen. Diplomatic weight expands across the continent. The country also gains technological prestige and capability. Operating a nuclear plant requires highly educated professionals, nuclear engineers, radiation safety specialists, reactor operators, maintenance technicians, regulatory experts, and emergency response teams. Training that workforce creates a class of highly skilled experts who strengthen the entire nation. Universities expand nuclear science programs. Research institutions attract international collaboration. The country becomes a hub for nuclear expertise in West Africa. This is what true liberation looks like. Not speeches or symbolic gestures, but concrete infrastructure that transforms daily life. Not dependence on foreign charity, but partnerships that transfer real technology and build genuine capacity. Not accepting limitations imposed by history, but breaking through those ceilings to achieve what others claimed was impossible. The mysterious convoys sparked excitement because they represent something Burkinabe citizens recognize instinctively. Their country is preparing for transformation. Whether those specific shipments were nuclear-related or general infrastructure upgrades, the underlying reality is undeniable. Burkina Faso is building the foundation for a nuclear-powered future. The grid is being strengthened. The workforce is being trained. The legal frameworks are being established. The partnerships are being solidified. And if everything proceeds as planned, by 2030, Burkina Faso will activate its nuclear reactor and become the second nuclear nation in Africa. That moment will represent far more than electricity generation. It will represent proof that African nations can master advanced technology without Western permission,